Dr. Sternglass knew the risk. A silent war, invisible twist. From the fallout clouds to the gamma rays, he saw the truth in a poisoned haze. They laughed him off, they turned away, but the radiation never fades away. Dr. Sternglass, can you hear us now?
Hello everybody, welcome back. That was quite the ordeal.
Slow decay brings us to our knees. In the quiet towns where secrets sleep.
That's Dr. Sternglass. You'll find it at James Luce's site, along with there's 300 other anti-nuclear songs. Here we go. We're back up. Hope everybody's doing well, including whoever trolled me there. You can call in 709-589-4406. We're about 40 minutes behind schedule. We had to restart. Couldn't record anything. And I just recorded that 2-minute video that the International Atomic Energy Agency removed from my YouTube video. They just clipped it out because I don't matter, I guess. Neither do you. And because I'm still behind, it took me 40 minutes here to get up and running again. It was a bit of a stress. Anyway, we're live. I'm going to play that 2-minute, 20-second video because I drank most of my water. I have to go top that up. I'll be right back. This is the video they clipped from my 14th anniversary. This was the clip, rather, that they clipped out of the video. We compared the videos, found what they clipped out on YouTube, live stream, of all things. And you can watch the whole presentation. It's on my site from last week. It's 2 hours and 30 minutes, I think it was that one. But anyway, this is just a 2-minute video. I'm going to play that for you. And I'll be ready to start the show. And Reactor 4 is right alongside of it. This is Reactor 4 in 2013. They had done that to it. That's before they allegedly got the fuel at the pools, which meant there was no pool, no fuel. Right, there's no water going to a fuel pool. The fuel pools are at the top of the buildings. There's only a stump lift. And as you can see, the bottom of the stump is not just deformed, but it's... So they put this contraption over it, and they done that. They built it off so it doesn't physically touch the building. They put these big panels on it with remote-controlled cranes. And the idea is to cover up the building, right? And we're not worried about it. We just want to make sure you understand, appreciate that these buildings actually don't exist anymore, and that this was a cover-up, right? And that's important for why the picture's redacted. That's part of the cover-up. And they have one of those chummies there where somebody can go up there and stand in them. I can assure you nobody's doing that. There's 8 reactor cores that melted down there. This was just strictly for photo shoots. All right, so here we go. These pictures, none of these pictures coming up were zoomed in on. And so there's quite a few. What happened with some of the pictures is they draw you a line. So notice how we're moving towards, what we're doing is we're moving towards the ocean from the easterly part of the site. And there's a few landmarks like a pond, a unique shaped little pond, parking lots on both sides. Now, you remember all that was completely rearranged over the next several years because you're quite a ways away from. So these types of pictures, you're zooming in now. Or you're heading down towards the reactors. Now I can zoom in, and I will on some of it, but there's not much benefit for these particular pictures for me to zoom in for you, because there's so much other stuff that we have to cover. So you're starting to see the center building up there was the administration building, and that took a pounding from the explosions of the reactors that are now at the top of your screen. Okay, so that wasn't the one I really wanted to play for you. This is the one. It doesn't matter because that is the first clip out of my anniversary video. And I apologize because we had the system was taken down. I had to do a new session, one of my backup sessions, to get up and running and be able to record. That's a trick they've used on me before, and I think they might have done it the last anniversary. All right, so I'm going to play this clip because it's only going to take 2 minutes. Here we go. This is the back of this is the clip the International Atomic Energy Agency had removed from my YouTube live stream, and we done a whole presentation on that last week to show you the documentation. But here's the clip, 2 minutes. Reactor 4. Those stacks, they look close, but they're actually not. They're so lethal, you'll die right away. If you go over there and stand up for a minute, your organs will melt. They're at 25 sieverts at the base of them. So whoever was doing this, they would have died that day. That's the most ruthless pictures imaginable. The industry has no soul. Whenever I see these pictures, I picture somebody at the International Atomic Energy Agency with a microphone talking to whoever's taking the picture, telling them to point to where they want that person to go from Vienna, right? In Vienna. The IAEA, as far as I know, didn't go there for at least 12 years, till 2023. And that was just to pick up a check for, what was it? I can't remember. $19 million? Because Japan is the third biggest donor to the International Atomic Energy Agency. So whoever stood there, they died that day for sure. Whoever took these pictures most likely died that day or that week. And there you got the 4 little monsters all in a row. A total of 36 reactor cores. And there was 1 in each reactor, except for reactor 4. It was in the pool. And so that meant in the pools of each of them were 8 reactors. So there was 9 reactor cores in unit 4. 9 in reactor 3, 9 in reactor 2, 9 reactors in number 1. They're all gone. And whoever took that picture, they're gone too. Like the reactor cores, they're gone. It's the most frightening pictures I've ever seen. When you spray a region, whenever you spray these regions to bind with the fuel particulates, that's a no man's land forever. It's just absurd that they had somebody do that. That was the International Atomic Energy Agency, no less. And the fuel pool of reactor 1 was dispersed in an explosion. And the same thing clearly for reactor 3 and reactor 4. Okay, and away we go. We got a great show for you tonight. I just played them to give myself a couple of minutes to recover because it took me 40 minutes to get the show back. Hard cases, eh? They forget it. You can't take down the system. That's why I spent so much money, right, to protect myself. You know, the first year after Fukushima, you might not be able to appreciate what I'm going to say to you, but they actually killed, it was like 14 months, 15-month period or something. They actually killed 9 computers of mine. I drove the shop crazy because I was returning the computers, right? Saying, well, I don't know, shot, man. Unfortunately, I was using cheap. Well, back in them days, there wasn't, your quality wasn't very high. Let's get after it. So that clip, I'm going to post those clips tomorrow. I recorded those clips about a half an hour before I was trying to go live. Everything was working perfect. Because, once you get in the studio, it's a couple hours to do all the preambles to set up everything. Here we go. We're going to go after it right now. And the Geiger counter up there is in real time. It's measuring gamma. Before a nuclear accident, that was enough to evacuate a nuclear plant area if you had that many numbers. Now that's normal because of a pulse event. But 3 Mile Island was pretty vicious. It warrants our scrutiny again. So on the 10th anniversary, this was a hunter who've seen 2 deer with deformed or mutated antlers. He shot them and kept the heads and asses just normal. All right, here we go. We're after it. 2468, we don't want to radiate. The strangest thing about 3 Mile Island was the strangest, because everybody ran there. Right, you can see all the pictures of people outside of 3 Mile Island. Like, oh my God, what? There's an accident? There was really, the people were very naive, and the system was quite aware of that. And the system is just unbelievable. Some of these, because they're so good quality, I'll have to come back to that screen for you. We'll get into a groove here at some point. Let me try to fix this. Yeah, so anyway, I spent a couple hours getting the show ready, and then when I went live, and the whole system just crashes on me. So, like, the idea, I guess, is when people get on my show, then they won't come back. They can't find me again or something, right? So it's very weird being stalked by the nuclear industry every day of my life, but that's exactly what's going on. It's hard to appreciate it, but this is the reality I live in. Radiation is being vented. Delay in alert assailed. Like 3 miles sealed off. A plant mishap, leaks. And you ever always hear the word leak, right? The leak covered a huge area. That's not a leak. That's a plume. 3 Mile Island cancers linked to radiation. So this was a study, but you can see you can't get access to the study unless you're very connected. This is the hope they have for the radiation effect, was you get a lot more Hulks and Spider-Mans. Homer Simpsons. CBC, which is a piece of shit media. Reports of enormous increase in cancer deaths. Think of that statement there. They were trying to downplay it, right? But infant mortality rates doubled. I'll show you those studies. Birds disappeared. Many mutations observed. People came back to their homes, had left their pets home, and their pets were blind. So how much friggin' radiation got out when that kind of adverse effect, horrifying effect, is manifesting, right? We survive. Well, you can't quantify that because it's not just cancer. You don't just die right away. There's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenal. The list is very long. This was, in this clip, I'm going to have to download the video again. It's not very good quality for some reason. And we've used this a lot, right? I have many copies of it. None of them are working the way they should be working. It's just a model of cancer cluster, not a model, but a study that quantifies cancer clusters, and the dark colors are where the big cancer clusters are too. It's a bit grainy audio, but it's only a short clip.
Here's the 3 Mile Island, Susquehanna River, Harrisburg up here. So these are the estimates from the dosimetrists under the funding with the court order that I showed previously of where the plumes went. And the heaviest plumes are in the darkest red to the northwest. And then
but Susquehanna River goes right down to New York, New Jersey, right? Is it? Indian River? No. That's Indian Point, is it? I can't remember. I'm not American, so I'm not. I got a good excuse for not knowing, but it's not really that good because I covered this for so long and so much. Insider in charge of monitoring radiation at 3 Mile Island says radiation release was hundreds or thousands of times higher than the government emits. Hundreds or thousands. What they meant to say was hundreds of thousands, I think. Because when you talk about radiation, a gram matters a lot, right? So a gram of, say, cesium is 88 curies, and each curie is 37 billion atoms. So it's 88 times 37 billion atoms. And a single atom can cause an autoimmune trigger in your body. Let's get after this. We're starting to get in the swing of it here now. It took a long time to get up and running. Naughty nuclear. They don't like me and they don't like my polls. I know that much. The industry's never had opposition as a problem, see? And their reaction to me is very violent and very strong. And it comes from so many directions, because you get the mining company hates me, the whole process, including the military. That's the last ones you need on your case all the time, because they're a bunch of vultures, right? Inside are in charge of monitoring radiation. This is radiation released tens of hundreds of times more. Startling revelation about the 3 Mile Island disaster raises doubts over Nuclear Safety Institute for the Southern Studies, 2009. Plant operator Metropolitan Edison in-house health physics staff fled the incident, the nuclear meltdown. Come on, just say it. Come on, just say it. Nuclear meltdown. Good up, come on. So responsibility for monitoring the radioactive emission were to the private contractors. With the in-house health physics, radiation physics, fled the site because it was a nuclear meltdown, asshole. So responsibilities for monitoring radioactive emissions went to a private contractor. Oh, great. I wonder who that was. Oh, RAD Services. This industry is so corrupt. It covers all their bases. You got to give them credit. The company immediately hired Randall Thomas to serve as the health physics technician in charge. I'll do it. All the radiation experts ran away. I'll do it. I got a bunch of homeless I can send in paper suits. The company immediately hired Randall Thompson to serve as the health physics technician in charge of monitoring the radioactive emissions, while Joy Thompson got a job monitoring radiation doses to 3 Mile Island. I might do another show tomorrow night on 3 Mile Island because they screwed up this one tonight on me. I think they should be spanked an extra few times in the nuclear industry for doing that to me. The company immediately hired Randall Thompson to serve as the health physics technician. Thompson said he found out during their time inside of 3 Mile Island. They worked inside of 3 Mile Island. Suggests radiation releases from the plant were hundreds, if not thousands, of times higher than the government and industries have acknowledged, and high enough to cause the acute health effects documented in people living near the plant that have been dismissed. Oh, maybe I was wrong. By the industry and the government is impossible given officials' radiation doses. So they turned out to be okay. The scumbags ran away and the good people came in. Unfortunately, they would have got severely radiated, but this picture cracks me up. They're compared to Fukushima, they're good suits, but compared to a nuclear accident, they're pointless. But here they are cleaning up 3 Mile Island. Let me get at it. In case you want to get a screen capture, you can always got a few things you can laugh at. They're cleaning up a nuclear meltdown. In their paper suits. And I shouldn't laugh because clearly if this is 3 Mile Island, they don't know what they're doing, right? They wouldn't be there. Nuclear academics. This is not a picture you're going to get a nuclear scientist. Radiation emissions and cancer incident within 10 miles of 3 Mile Island. So the bright orange clusters over there on the map, that was it was 160 cancers. I don't know. So there's not just cancer, right? There's heart problems, liver problems, lung problem, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. There's real problems because the radiation attacks your body by exploding inside your body every second. And you flood it with white blood cells for the rest of your life. So for every single atom, you're going to have a lot less oxygen in your body. And that'll manifest as incredible mental health issues, right? That's why they always poke that narrative out there. Oh, they're mentally ill, or they're just unstable people, right? Like radiophobia. Implications for life event research. Perceived danger, perceived harm to health, and psychological distress. There's an overwhelming amount of studies you'll find about that stuff, because they were like just saying it was just radiophobia. Nothing got out. And so the industry is it's cancerous on its own merits. Children and pregnant women near the nuclear plant leave. That was 3 days later. They wouldn't let them leave for the first 3 days. They didn't want anybody to panic. It's better than... And of course, the 3 Mile Island is why you now have sirens within 10 miles of a nuclear plant. It should extend out to at least 100 miles. Radiation doesn't give a shit about a 10-mile limit. Cancer incidences among residents of 3 Mile Island accident area. But if you had to have a 100-mile radius, safety radius, people might wake up. People might say, like, 100 miles, really? I shouldn't. There's a lot. I got to get iodine pills, but I'm 100 miles away. Yeah, well, it could be an accident. But the iodine pill's not going to help you, by the way. It'll get your any gamma is going to end up in your thyroid. That means at least minimum radioactive hormones for the rest of your children's and your friends, your loved ones, and yourself, and your birds and bees. Cancer incidences among residents of 3 Mile Island accident area 1982, 89, 95, Dana. 3 Mile Island stress effect. Stress. And you'll hear this with all nuclear events, where they'll demonize the victims and say they're just radiophobia. Worry and fear, they'll just mock them, literally, and with contempt too, right? They have this incredible contempt for anybody. They treat them like they're Freddy Kruegers. Worry and fear about possible exposure to radiation was prevalent throughout the cleanup and restart of the reactors and persisted over a decade. Worries and fears about possible exposure. It was Arnie Gunnis and Lake Barrett ran the cleanup. And about 2 years later, they boiled off millions of gallons of water at multiple sieverts per liter. The year of the boiled it off into the local environment, where it ended up turning into rainfall, right? The year of the near disaster, and in the winter would have been snowfall eventually. The year of near disaster on 3 Mile Island. But it was a disaster, as you'll see coming up, as you're probably already seen with some of the stuff I already showed you. This is probably one of the most frightening pictures imaginable, is a playground with a nuclear power plant in the background, any direction, or a farm. Almost every nuclear power plant, and not excluding this one certainly, is surrounded by farms as far as you can see. And it poisons the fresh water, which in these places usually situated way up the rivers, and that way all the farms downstream are poisoning the food. It's not just the farms around the nuclear plant, and almost all of them are surrounded by nuclear or by farms, particularly reprocessing sites and stuff like that. Allegations of pet deaths, because they produce an absurd amount of radiation. It's the fuel pools are still splitting the atoms at nuclear plants. So after 14 months, you got a disease factory on your hands. Allegations of pet deaths after radiation exposure are supported by universities, by top universities, reanalysts at 3 Mile Island. People came home to find the animals with their eyes burnt out after 3 Mile Island evacuation. But Dick Thompson wouldn't evacuate people for the first 3 days. He didn't want people to panic. And he's only been on his job for like 2 months at that time or something, 60 days. Joseph Magano, need to focus on health, not money. Need to focus on health, not money. And so he would have got a kaboot. No more grants for you. Cancer rates rose 64% among the victims within 10 miles of 3 Mile Island, from 1722 to 2,800 cases. So, like, once you hear cancer, then you got to assume it was 100 times more heart problems, liver problems, lung problems. So you should be doing studies on heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory. And the first studies they normally do is not cancer. It's congenital malformation. It's autism. It's Down syndrome. That's the first 2 studies they're doing. What does that tell us? So what's it going to be like for the species, right? Humans are way up, so the species are going to be decimated right away. That alone, particularly the small species, will be sterilized with those doses, full body x-rays, right? That alone should have raised the red flags about the exposure to toxic radioactivity. That alone. Yeah, because cancer is typically latent. So it's one of the last ones to show up. But see, like when you get a big dose, the minimum is going to happen to your children and your friends and your families and every person in those communities, including the idiots, the weirdos for the nuclear industry themselves. What's going to happen to every one of you within 100 miles, even with a nominal nuclear accident? The emissions are so great, see, for just a small amount, is you're going to be producing radioactive hormones and radioactive stem cells from your skeleton. So your thyroid, pituitary, your adrenaline glands are going to be producing radioactive hormones and storing radioactive hormones for use throughout your body. And that's going to be permanent. And the same thing with your stem cells. So what's the worst thing that can happen to small animals, mammals, baby humans, baby mammals, etc., is they're producing radioactive hormones and radioactive stem cells for their entire developing life if they manage to make it through that cycle. And with the smaller species, they noted in the 50s and 60s, with studies in the United Kingdom of no less, that reproduction failed for all kinds of migratory species. They knew the harmful effects of it. That's why they're surrounded by farms. They just don't like us. The death rate of infants under 1 month in Durnford County, which is the site of the 3 Mile Island disease factory, and the Lebanon County immediate downwind east jumped 50% in the first 2 years after the meltdown. Death rates jumped 50%. And the death rates of infants in less than 28 days old rose from -7% to 1%. 136 excess deaths. They had a huge die-off at Chauvin in British Columbia, Washington, and other West Coast cities and communities. Those studies came out within a couple of months of Fukushima. The rate of death of all causes in children aged 1 to 9 rose to plus 12%, excluding homicides, accidents, etc., So like if you can't just include death, right? Because death is latent, right? You might be sick for 20 years, and in that 20 years you'll end up liquidating your assets to try to regain some of your health, but it's a futile effort because it's radiation. Fallout, right? 3 Mile Island, what was once too cheap to meter, is now too toxic to clean up. That really does sum it up. Which meant all the communities should have been bulldozed down, put in the big dump trucks, and taken to a nuclear waste site for 1 million years, and then abandoned for 1 million years. Surge in coal pollution led to smaller newborns. So this study came out in 2017, and what they're talking about, the study looked at the aftermath of 3 Mile Island accident in Tennessee, which caused 2 nuclear plants to be shut down and the power to be replaced locally by coal generation. The weight of newborns fell 5.4% in counties that had the highest levels of air pollution from coal particles emitted by the replacement plants, the investigation said. But when you look at what was happening to babies as they grew, the ones that survived grow up and reproduce, then you'd expect to see these adverse effects. And so they were getting a lot of them, so they wanted to demonize the coal industry, and he wrote that article. It was actually, that's what happens, and we got different spectrums of species shrinking, and they're trying to quantify it, but all of them close or right alongside of nuclear events, right? Remembering Ernest Sternglass, and that was a reference to that was a song I played at the beginning. He deserved a song like that. And that's a great song. Remembering Ernest Sternglass, the first scientist to put a number on the United States nuclear deaths die at 91, 2015. He's a wonderful soul. The first scientist, Dr. Sternglass. Reports U.S. infant mortality, which had plunged steadily throughout the 20th century, was essentially unchanged in the 50s and early 60s. Roughly 375,000 excess deaths. He's talking about infant mortality. Infant mortality. The cause, Dr. Ernest Sternglass, physicist and University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine professor, theorized that the stagnation in infants' death progress was a result of an atomic test fallout. So this is a picture of 3 Mile Island. That's like the scariest picture you can imagine, because in the right conditions, the emissions from that now, so that's the steam stack, but it's a tall, skinny stack that is emitting hideous amounts of radiation from the fuel pools. Radiation being vented. Delay and alert. Yeah, delay was a 3-day before they even evacuated the children and pregnant women. It was absurd. The whole story is absurd. Never going back. And you don't see many stories like this. But that should give you the... Like, you got to realize there was a lot of transient people there too, right, at that time. So they'll never know the real numbers. Never going back. Survivor protest 3 Mile Island restart on the 46th anniversary. Oh, bless their hearts for getting out there. A group of people described themselves as survivors of the 3 Mile Island partial meltdown. And that word partial meltdown, they blast that everywhere, right? Partial meltdown. Partial meltdown. The meltdown. Partial. To the very small off-site release, partial meltdown. So why did they need to reinforce it so blatant? Because even if you're not really you're just scanning through, that gets imprinted into your head. And when you start referring to it, they're hoping that that's the words you're going to use, right? How do you have a partial meltdown is another question, because it'll burn at almost 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. It'll boil all the water off, so the rest of the fuel has to melt down too. You know, even if it only burns at 4,000 and 5,000 degrees, and 4,000 or 5,000 degrees is a big temperature, but that's basically half of what it should burn at. So how's the water not? It doesn't need oxygen to melt down. So once it burns, once it ignites, once it's exposed, and they had no containment with this rig apparently. So you would have had a full meltdown, not a partial meltdown. And they're brutal with their if you read the mainstream media, it's brutal with that narrative. And in the background, you can't really see it, but it's all farmland. Epstein said that the daycares and nursery schools were not included in the evacuation process because they're going to the wackos are going to reopen it. And so the daycares and nurseries were not included in the evacuation process. These people are idiots. Well, they're not. They didn't not remember to include them. They just didn't include them. They didn't want to include them. It was on purpose. He also said the tourists, the Amish, the Mennonites in the area cannot be included in the evacuation plan given the lack of telecommunications to those communities. But how are you going to evacuate? Because, like, if you ever see the patterns of the emissions, they cover the whole planet in a short period of time. So the new owners have hired 600 workers. They hired 300 in addition to hundreds of contractors. Right, so the contractors will get sent into the heavy radiated areas. Every time they do maintenance, they'll hire 1,000, 1,500 people. And then they'll send them into the most radioactive places. They got to remove the covers and take out fuel, right? So everything, once you break open the containment, and just because it's so small and you can't really see it or hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it or perceive it. Cancellation also said it was working on a train and license reactor operators. You need a high school education and on-the-job training. It's like 4-year on-the-job training. And then you got to put an application to the regulatory agency. They'll give you a cheat sheet anyway once at that stage because you're a useful idiot if you stays at that long. And then you get a good pay, right? And you can turn into a scumbag like Rod Adams. And senior reactor operators like Rod Adams working to train and license reactor operators, senior reactor. Because a real scientist won't go there and do that, see? So when the nuclear plant says there's a job and all you got to do is have a high school education, just don't do that, right? Don't do that. If you got a friend and their kids and they work in the government, tell their kids, get them to take the job. They'll get cancer. You cannot erase history. That's the only way we're going to get rid of the idiot government. You cannot erase history. You cannot rebrand a nuclear disaster. What's next? We're going to rename the Titanic the Love Boat. Many shares concerns that potential terror attack in the United States could target nuclear energy sites. Nuclear energy sites are terrorist. The fuel pool is splitting atoms. So every 14 months you put more fuel in the pool. So every 14 months you double the amount of radiation atoms. Like, you got to realize this. The reactor is powering 1 million homes and businesses by splitting atoms. It does that forever, and that's why it's dangerous forever. So once you take it out and put it in the fuel pool, it balls off 120,000 liters. Each liter is going to be a sickening amount of radiation. It goes up to those tall, skinny stacks, right? And then almost all of them are surrounded by farms. What do you think they're up to by doing that all the time? 100% of the times. It's just shy of 100% of the farms are surrounded by farms. You think that's a coincidence? Just saying. Many shared concerns the potential terror attack in the United States could target it. Health concerns were brought forward. So they're talking about potential birth defects. There's no potential. It's guaranteed birth defects. The first thing they study anyway is autism and Down syndrome. What does that tell us? Immunity issues, compromise your immune system because of bioaccumulation, cancer-causing chemical release. And so you got to include, like if you do a study, you got to look for heart problems. The studies should be looking for heart problems first. You got a lot more deaths of heart attacks and a lot more people having the heart attacks. I'm just going to take a sip of tea. Maybe that'll cut back on the throat. Hopefully. Fix that. So you got to think, like, what's going to happen to everybody is their thyroids are going to be producing radioactive hormones, and the health issues from that are catastrophic. And their skeleton is producing radioactive stem cells, so the health consequences from that is going to be catastrophic. And if it's in children, and it might only manifest for the first number of years because it takes quite a while, right? Your body attacks with white blood cells for the rest of your life, and is less red blood cells, which is less oxygen nutrition. So the health effects are quite severe down the road, right? Nuclear, that's a small amount we're talking about. Nuclear reactor accident leaks radioactive steam. Every time I hear the word leak, it's very disappointing that these people actually exist. Constellation releases a statement on an anniversary of nuclear accident at 3 Mile Island. So, they weren't running it at that time, or since then. They just bought it, right? So they should keep their pie holes shut. On March 28, 1979, the Unit 2 reactor on 3 Mile Island went through a partial, again, the words partial meltdown. You'll literally never see a sentence without that framed exactly like that, marking the worst nuclear power accident in U.S. history. Well, the worst one was Santa Susana, like 460 times 3 Mile Island in 1959, right? A sodium reactor. But that's the cover story, right? Like Hanford was 450 billion gallons of liquid sludge from the Manhattan Project, the chain reactions, because they never had nutting iron out at this point, right? And they just dumped it in trenches. They dumped it on line trenches of that. There's like 40 miles of unlined trenches. 450 billion gallons is equal to an aquarium 6 feet wide, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet more than once. So imagine a wall of nuclear sludge, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet. And how many other Hanfords are out there? Los Alamos National Laboratory might be able to give them a run. Russia and Soviet Union, China can give them a run. I mean, Hanford is insane, but it doesn't minimize what happened at 3 Mile Island, which is surrounded by farms. I mentioned that. Worst nuclear accident in history. So actually, here it is. Look, 50 years after American worst nuclear meltdown was Santa Susana, California. It was at 459 times the amount of radiation released during Chernobyl. It's a 5-year study by a panel of independent scientists years after the incident, and looked at the data and said it was equal to 460. But because that wasn't a commercial reactor, it doesn't get any loving. So technically, by using the word commercial reactor, you have plausible deniability when they look in a mirror. But it is not plausible deniability when me and you look at it, because we know what they've done, right? It's just very dishonest. The most dishonest thing you can do, really, isn't it? The most dishonest thing you can do is omit the fact that 3 Mile Island happened, or Santa Susana happened, and was so severe. And then turn around and call 3 Mile Island the world's worst nuclear accident, because you're only including commercial. You're not willing to include the other reactors. And it doesn't mitigate 3 Mile Island, don't get me wrong. And if you look at the build-up, Santa Susana Field Laboratory, still not cleaned up, right? Spit. And they use the word spit. See that? So it deserves prominence because it's so harmful, is what I'm saying. So the word spit is completely a derogatory, is a inappropriate. It's an inappropriate elegy, because it never stops emitting for a very long period of time. So the Santa Susana is built up since then. This happened in 1959. And so it's quite a big site. So you can look at the site. But outside the site, right, these are huge cities. Now they got over 600,000 people or something within 10 miles of the plant that didn't live there when Santa Susana happened. They hid it for 50 years, and it happened in 1959. So look at these. When you zoom in, these are very big, massive, probably 5,000 clusters. For each of these clusters, around 5,000 homes, they're clustered in. And it's built in a nuclear wasteland from Santa Susana. And that's Sims Valley or something, is it? Let me just go through these pictures. So when you look at these clusters, right, it doesn't really do it justice. When you zoom in on it, you're like, oh shit. Right? Because when you look at it that way, or you look at it this way, or even that way, or even that way, it doesn't really, when you zoom right in, though, then you really start to appreciate what they got done. So this is how they got rid of the radiation. They let 600,000 people build their homes there. That's how they cleaned it up. They never cleaned up anything. Because Rocketdyne was there too for a long time, right? So these, and then they got the massive hospital system. Let me get out of the way here because you'll see the scale is, that's 200 feet. So let me go back for a second. 200 feet till we can see Santa Susana. Is this one maybe? This one is about 2, 4. So that's about 10 kilometers away or something. And that's the other direction. And when you zoom in, though, you really start to say, holy shit, there's a lot of homes and a lot of houses there, right? Anyway. It was a big facility, man. Still is, right? It's a nuclear wasteland within 100 miles of it. Then there were studies. These studies, cancer incidences among residents of 3 Mile Island. 2011, November, same year as Fukushima. So you definitely got to come out and the first two over there certainly don't look like they're from the United States. Mom, Dana's bigot. No, I'm just stating the fact. A 5-mile radius. We use the registry to investigate the potential cancer risk from, and they naturally assume it's low dose, which is a disgusting, bigoted thing to do. Cancer incidence data among the 3 Mile Island cohorts were available from 1982 to 95 because 97% of the population were white. First off, there was a lot of transient workers there. And few cancer cases were reported for those younger than 18 years of age. But that's not true, was it? They had newborn die-off clusters. I showed you that at the beginning, right? The evidence is in the earlier part of the video. After adjusting for age, gender, education, smoking. Oh, they forgot drinking. Normally they're showing bananas and drinking with this one. And boy, yeah, they did. Look, background radiation. Like, why would you include stuff we're already acclimated to through genetic superior selection that we live in harmony with? That is part of our DNA, so to speak. Because that's how you whittle away the numbers, right? Increased cancer risk from low levels. And why is cancer the only thing you're looking at, you scumbag? Low level radiation exposure within 3 Mile Island cohorts were small, mostly statistically non-significant. An increased risk of leukemia was found among men exposed to higher, you like this one, external radiation doses. And women were found to have increased cancer risk among those exposed to higher external radiation doses. So nobody drank anything or breathed in anything or consumed anything. It was all external radiation doses. That's your typical academic right there. I trust a royal wolf more than I would trust an academic. And you should too. Oh, mainly xenon-133 and iodine. Iodine got an 8-day half-life. Xenon-133 is like 2.5 days or something. Well, the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods at a nuclear meltdown is curium. That's what he calls it, curium. The meltdown. But the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod is curium isotopes, not xenon, which is still prolific, still brutal. Don't get me wrong. So is iodine. It's brutal. and it's prolific, but it's nothing. The biggest byproduct of radiated fuel rods is the curium isotopes. And for curium isotopes in the laboratory, they use a lead shield 20 times thicker than the one they do for plutonium. So what are you more worried about, the curium isotope, the xenon, or the iodine-131? If you say all three, you're correct. If you say curium, you're 100% correct. But they're all terrible, right? Because you don't have an autoimmune trigger for any anthropogenic man-made isotope. Time spent with a 5-mile radius are during the 10 days after the accident. So they're only studying external doses and time spent within a 5-mile radius during the 10 days after the accident. Estimate the average maximum likely whole body doses for individuals. It was like eating a dozen bananas, wasn't it? Cancer. Well, if you're not going to include all the other health issues, then you're a fraud. You're a criminal. You're a criminal. You're a terrorist, right? The 3 Mile Island Unit 2 decontamination and recovery collection. It's quite big, eh? 6,000 photos. We only got maybe 300. 3,400 videotapes. I don't think we got either one, do we? 6,000 photos and slides and several hundred technical reports. I haven't got access to none of them. I'd love to get my hands on that. And the development of the collection access to this material is described in the paper. Now, not because I didn't try, once I've seen that, but I couldn't get access to any of it. We will endure the difficulties, the partial meltdown. I got to have that there. It's like spitting in your face when you say it. That's what the partial meltdown is equivalent to them spitting in your face. It's like if you went to a lecture and you've never been to this lecture and they knew it, and they walk down to you and spit in your face and say the partial meltdown at 3 Mile Island in 1979, and nobody would bat their eye because everybody else there was part of the industry. They might laugh, but that's about it. It was really crazy how people gathered up at 3 Mile Island. What? There's a meltdown. Let's go down to 3 Mile Island. There's a meltdown. These are not words you're supposed to hear. But that's what you see in the population do. They were so naive. They're like a bunch of chickens, right? Whack, whack, whack. 3 Mile Island. Whack, 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 whack. Let's go down. Everybody ran down. What the fuck is going on? And no concept, right? The industry was so secretive. They had, during the Manhattan Project, they had 10,000 scientists, and they had 20,000 spies. 10,000 of them were spying on the scientists. The other 10,000 were spying on the spies who were spying on the scientists. This year is not a milestone anniversary of the partial meltdown at 3 Mile Island, nuclear generating plant, Londonderry, but it's an anniversary that Central Pennsylvania will never forget. The partial meltdown. We will endure, Dick. The partial meltdown. Should have write a song about it. The partial meltdown. Of the Unit 2 reactor, March 28, 1979. Partial meltdown. They just shove that down your throat till you don't even want to read the story anymore. A plane carrying detection equipment measured radiation level between 300 and 1,200 millirems per hour at 7:15 a.m. An uncontrolled burst of radioactive gas is vented from the containment building into the auxiliary building. They always say that, eh? No, it went into the auxiliary building where everybody's too. Yeah, we vented into the building where everybody's hanging there. Let's hook that pipe up. It doesn't exist. That's their story, right? We will endure the difficulty. That always shocks me, right? Those words were meant to justify what they had done, right? Or they didn't let people evacuate. The partial, except for the health physics at the nuclear site, they ran away. The partial meltdown of Unit 2, that's so important. If there's nothing to run away from, why would you run away? The partial meltdown of the Unit 2 reactor, again, the partial meltdown. How do you have a partial meltdown, though? See? Because once the rods are exposed, the zirconium cladding catches fire, at around 1800 degrees, and then the fuel pellets, uranium plutonium pellets, are coated in zirconium-2. Once it's exposed to air, it melts down, or if it's hit with 1800 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, it melts down, and it doesn't need oxygen to burn, so even if it's underwater, it'll burn. But at these temperatures, once the plutonium ignites at 5 to 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, and uranium pellets, then all the water just boils off like a flash, and then everything has to melt down because they all have the same attribute. Don't worry, I'm only going to tell you 500 more times. The partial meltdown of Unit 2 reactor at March 28 prompted days of uncertainty, fear, confusion, evacuation, people running there to see what was going down. I don't see no meltdown. Let's open the beer. And visit from the government officials, including Jimmy Carter. He recently died. When he toured 3 Mile Island, we assured the Pennsylvanians are tough people, made of sterner stuff, and we will endure. Dick Thornburgh, governor, right? He should have been arrested and put in jail. Everything he owns should be liquidated, and the assets should be distributed to the victims. We assure the Pennsylvania are tough people. Well, it don't matter how fucking tough you are. Radiation doesn't give a shit if you're a whale or a human or a bee. It attacks your immune system for the rest of your life. The incident, aka nuclear meltdown at 3 Mile Island, according to the Non-Regulatory Commission, was the most serious accident in the U.S. commercial nuclear power plant. Yeah, because Santa Susana, not too far away, was equal to 460 3 Mile Island's emissions. Well, it's still going on today. They covered it up for 50 years. It was the most serious accident in the U.S. commercial nuclear plant. I'm pretty sure Santa Susana is not, well, Los Alamos National Laboratory and Hanford nuclear meltdowns were way worse than 3 Mile Island. So 3 Mile Island is their poster child for the nuclear industry, where they say, see, it's not so bad. And I really disrespect them for saying that, by the way. It was the most serious accident in the U.S. commercial nuclear power plant operating history, because that's the plausible deniability, see? Although its small radioactive releases had no detectable health effects on the plant workers or the public. Now, I showed you earlier babies dying in clusters and cancer clusters and pits with their eyes burnt out of their heads when the people came back from top universities. Although small radioactive releases had no detectable health effects. That's the problem, is a small amount will have a detectable health effect, but it's usually latent, right? The combination of equipment malfunction, design-related problems, worker errors led to 3 Mile Island partial meltdown. Very small off-site releases. Well, according to the plant, it was incredible doses. It was a pulse event on top of that. No, it was a massive meltdown and a bigger cover-up. Began 4 a.m. in the morning. The Agony of the Atom was a special section from the Patriot newsprint. That section, it should have been on TV, right? There should have been sirens going off, but there was no sirens back then. And this was the catalyst for sirens worldwide after. All nuclear plants in the United States had to implement some of the nuclear plants in the United States got up to 150 sirens, large sirens, within 10 miles. If you can hear a siren, then you're in the worst place possible. That section includes this blah, 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 Pennsylvania. Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay, I remember. I'm sorry. Malfunction valve. Doesn't matter what happened. The fact that it happened and the fact that you covered it up is what really matters. And triggered a chain reaction of mechanical and human errors. Chain reaction. So right, they dilute the prominence of the actual accident itself by misrepresenting the words, and trigger a chain reaction, mechanical human errors. A chain reaction. Only chain reaction should be these people being prosecuted for crimes they committed. A relief valve on the reactor coolant pressurizer failed to close. 250,000 gallons of radioactive water to spill onto the floor of the reactor containment building on top of that. I got no idea when I got done there. 250,000 gallons. That's 5,555 45-gallon drums. So how can you call 5,555 420-gallon drums, 45-gallon drums, a spill? Right, a leak here, a spill there. So the miscommunication, right, of misrepresenting, like grammar is such an important thing when it comes to the propaganda machine. The sump pump in the containment building activated. Well, the sump pumps are not meant to handle this much water. This is a catastrophic amount. Radioactive steam from the water eventually finds its way into the atmosphere through a venting system. So the water was so radioactive, when it evaporated, that was the radioactive fallout. Same as the fuel pools are emitting all day long through a venting system. The plant, these people are insane, which means these buildings would have had to have been completely taken off the site after. The plant operators, because they're so radioactive from the emissions, right? The plant operators shut down 2 other pumps, controlling the flow of the water around the reactor core, contributing to the fuel damage and the rise of hydrogen bubbles at the top of the reactor vessels. That was to deter cold shutdown steps into the next week. So this was the cover story as far as I know. Plant officials first began to realize the seriousness of the situation. The radiation may have escaped into the atmosphere. Oh, you know, when the health staff ran away. The people who goes around with Geiger counters in their hands ran away. Maybe is at that point everybody else just says, oh, maybe there's something else going on we should know about. Right? Because that's what happened originally, right? Clarence Deller of the State Emergency Management Agency office is notified the emergency begins to launch alert for evacuation plan, which was appropriate, for Dauphin, York, Lancaster counties. But they got overridden. Donald Butch Ryan, a fire department dispatcher, received words of emergency at the plant, is told to stand by. Why are you going to send in firefighters? They don't know anything about radiation. Why would you do that? What did a firefighter ever do to you? The Emergency Management Agency cancels the alert. I sent out an alert. What? Cancel that? A Patriot News reporter learns from county and state officials that the emergency had been declared at 3 Mile Island. An initial report indicated there was a radiation leak, spill. I really disrespect these creatures. Due to the failure to fuel. The first reporters dispatched to the scene. Yeah, get on down to that nuclear meltdown. Roger that, boss. Don't take my car this time. Take that old one out there in the parking lot. Bill Gross, a Metropolitan Edison Company public relation representative, read a statement. The station manager reporting on the problem in technical terms and saying that the radioactive monitoring teams have found nothing on or off site. Remember the plane that flew over I showed you earlier? Between 11 a.m. and 1:30 p.m., Met Ed engineers vented radioactive steam from the plant. During the same period, Lieutenant Governor William Scranton III, the snob, is holding the first of 3 news conferences saying everything is under control and there appears to be no danger to the health of the public. Like, these are huge sites. You can't quantify that quick, right? It takes 8, 9, 10 hours to quantify a statement like that. And you only got minutes because the wind is very effective at distributing this in every direction conceivable. It's not like a small plume. It distributes. The wind's always changing, right? It's not like the wind always, everywhere you go, the wind today is going to blow this direction. It doesn't work that way. Noting that the plant in safe conditions, he denied any delay in notifying authorities and contained radiation releases are small. He indicated there have been 0.1% damage to the 36,000 fuel rods. 36,000. 0.1% damage. And then how are you going to quantify that? That prick there with the black glasses. Scranton says utilities ended venting contamination steam into the air, but accused Med Ed of earlier giving a state conflicting information. The 5 o'clock, half an hour later, the plant again vents radioactive steam. The radioactive steam they're alleging is from the 5,500 45-gallon drums. So this was coming from the reactor itself, right? So this would have all the atoms you can imagine, because that's the water where they're splitting all the atoms and heating the water to, and that heat is transferred to the cooling system, right? And it spins the turbine, but then it has to cool. So, a million gallons a minute is the cooling, but that water inside of it is the reactor core. Think of the water they're talking about as the reactor core, because the reactor core is under the water, right? That's how it doesn't need oxygen, right? That chain reaction. It's split. It's not a neat trick, but a deadly trick where you're splitting atoms. The atoms now got so much heat, energy, and then once you take that reactor out and put it in a fuel pool, you don't have a containment anymore, by the way. So that's the water that was being vented. So these are typically 1,000 pounds per square inch. So if you got a leak there, you're not going to fix it. You got to shut down the system to fix it, right? You can't fix it. And even then, if you lose a bunch, now how are you going to fix that? You got to get a lot of homeless people together to go fix that. I said the evacuation of small children and pregnant women after an accident nuclear power plant, but he waited 3 days before that, right? Dick Thornburgh, Richard, to your left. What he done was, how can you ever forgive that? How does that work? The radiation leaked. Every time I hear the word, I want to scratch a nuclear scientist's car. Radiation leak from the plant has been in the low 5 to 7 millirems per hour. The radiation leak from the plant. No, like if it's coming, where it's coming from, it's at 2 to 3 to 4 sieverts per liter. The incident, there's no way you're going to get 5 to 7 millirems per hour from anywhere else, right? So, the attributes that they were talking about acknowledging, this is coming out of the reactor core. So that particular water is in contact with the reactor core, the fuel rods. So that stuff is completely saturated. This is absurd, and because it's melting down, it has fuel particulates that are also splitting atoms per liter that are in each liter we're talking about, right? So it's incredibly radioactive. It's absurdly radioactive. A news conference is held at the Friends Meeting House in Harrisburg by Dr. George Wald, Nobel Prize winner, Dr. Ernest J. Sternglass, Director of Radiological Physics for the University of Pittsburgh. And Sternglass called for the plant to be shut down, and Wald said any radiation can cause harm. Sternglass called for the plant to be shut down. Met Ed and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Sternglass was the song we played at the beginning of the show. For 4 senators and 5 congressmen, Senator Gary Hart, D. Colo, labeled the mishap, nuclear meltdown now, mishap, the most serious accident in the history of nuclear power. Right, so again, right, plausible deniability, and you can exclude Santa Susana Laboratories, which was equal, the sodium reactor that melted down was equal to 460 Three Mile Islands. See? And this framing the narrative that way, so is on purpose, right? So you have really got to be an insider to use that narrative, to appreciate why that narrative is important for the industry, to protect the industry. Because normally you wouldn't say, you would just say the history of nuclear, right? Of the nuclear industry or something like that. Because of who it is and where they're to and what they're saying, then they were told to say that, right, by the regulatory agencies. If you have a video of it, you'll see he's reading it on a piece of paper. Says he will introduce legislation required immediately, because he's not a nuclear expert. He doesn't know. How does he come up with those narratives? Notification of officials in the event of any incident at the plant. Yeah, but if something gets out, make sure he tells us. Okay. It's like the perfect industry to be a piece of shit. Is the nuclear industry. Well, I'm not a nuclear scientist. I don't know, right? I'm just a politician. They're good guys down there. Yeah, how many times have you heard that over the years? I mean, they got all kinds of guards there with guns down there. They must be nice people. Okay. That's what gets you to sleep, I suppose. It's almost too much to beer sometimes, isn't it? But he's down to the nuclear plant, the reporter. So you know your boss hates your guts when you get that job. An NRC official in Washington says the damage to the fuel rods is more serious than originally thought. Indicates it'll be a long time before the cleanup is finished. Long time. You have no idea. Too toxic to clean up. How are you going to clean it up? Where are you going to get all the homeless people? Nuclear scientists are not going to go in there. They're not going to live, so they'd kill a bunch of homeless people. What was it, Arnie Gunnison who said he hired people who only worked for 3 minutes? Let me see, I got that clip there. See if I can find it. I used to hire people for 3 minutes. It's scary, man. The whole industry is just gobblish, isn't it? And you don't realize it. They all seem so prim and proper. They always got their suits on. Oh, yeah, I got it. I used to hire people for 3 minutes. And then they get 6 months off because they're a nuclear scientist?
I hired employees that could only stay on the job for 3 minutes before they exceeded their personnel exposure.
Ooh, that gives me the shivers just thinking about it. Hey, Ben Deco, come over here. Put on that paper suit. Want to make $50? Let's play that again.
I hired employees that could only stay on the job for 3 minutes before they exceeded their personnel exposure. So you get all suited up and you do all of that, and maybe you can do 3 to 5 minutes worth of work.
So that's a lethal dose. Right, that's a lethal dose he's talking about. Exceeded his personal radiation dose. Listen, when you go into a place where after 3 minutes you exceeded your personal radiation dose, you've done more than that. Because radiation it'll melt your organs. You get enough that over the next week or something, your organs melt and you die, right? And you get temp workers, the homeless and the destitute, and the victims of society, immigrants who don't speak the language. And you just keep throwing them at the problem until they... And all the money instead of paying the victims, you pick up your check next week. Well, next week doesn't come. Arnie gets a swimming pool. Every month, Arnie gets a big garage or a big building, and he can call it Gunderson's. The big building you got. How do you think you got that? An uncontrolled burst of radioactive gas is vented in the containment building into the auxiliary building. Sure it is. And carrying detection equipment measured radiation between 300 to 1200 millirims. That was a plane flying by. So this was first off, the uncontrolled burst of radioactive gas is vented. It's quite questionable that's going to... It's not significantly worse than that because we have the luxury of hindsight, right? York County Civil Defense Director Leslie Jackson put Phase 1 of the nuclear disaster plan for the county in operation primarily to stop the panic. No, nothing got out. I'll go home, go blind like your pets. Primarily to stop the panic caused by unconfirmed reports of evacuation. No, people were evacuated. Some people actually went to the nuclear site. Oh my goodness. We got spammed down again a little bit, did we? We're back up and running though. That was crazy. It took 40 minutes to get back up and running, right? Because once I went into one of my backup sessions, I had to re-enter all the information again, right? Caused by unconfirmed reports of evacuation. Confirmed the release of radioactivity reporters, and so you were right to evacuate. And some venting reports, Herb tells a Patriot News reporter, Patriot News, that some venting was done in the evening and possibly radiation levels did climb momentarily. You always hear that narrative, don't you? Asked if an area alert was in progress, replied he was not sure. This is the NRC too, right? County Civil Defense Organization, Pennsylvania's National Guard, are placed on standby for possible evacuation. Listen, you're so far behind. Once you get 30 minutes into the event, to the emissions, you need to be moving within 5. The Associated Press moved because you don't want to be breathing it in. You don't want to get all on your hair. You get it on your clothing, then it's in your laundry, then it's in your bedding, then it's in your children's. And you got to go back to a radioactive. If you go back to your house, people were going back to their houses, left their pets, and found their dogs were blind or dead, which meant and left their doors and windows open, so it meant their house was completely contaminated. Should never ever walk back into property again. See, once you see the dead animal, you fucking run away. Next time. The Associated Press moves an urgent story saying the governor is considering an evacuation of 4 counties. Now you get some real action now. Of course, Dick Thornburgh is like, no! Thornburgh press secretary indicated there was no need to evacuate. It says the governor had warned people within a 10-mile radius of the plant to stay indoors, get sick, and fucking die. Screw you. Some guy seeing he's got to radiate it. I'll take a deep breath, George. We're going to check you. A second release of the radioactive gases occurred. It's like, first off, it was pouring out. There was a hole in the fucking thing. So this is all fictional. There was a second release and a first release. No, this thing was hemorrhaging radiation even 10 years later. It never stops. It's just constantly pouring out, right? It's a chain reaction. You can't see it or smell it or hear it or feel it or touch it. A siren goes off in downtown Harrisburg, causing panic. Not some panic, it caused panic. Dick Thornburgh was the new governor, right? You got to save nuclear industry. You got the phone. You better save this industry, boy. We got you elected. Issued advisory for pregnant women and preschool-aged children to evacuate from a 5-mile radius of the plant. Really? 5 miles, Dick? He also ordered 23 schools in the area to close because they wouldn't even let the schools close. 3 West Shore School District schools began evacuation, so it's too late. You're so far down the road now. The Harrisburg East Mall closes early. Evacuees from the Middletown area line up for their first meal at an arena. Yeah. Like if you got evacuated from nuclear, you don't go back. Just have your papers somewhere where you can just throw them in a bag and run with them. Because what's more important, your health, your future? Because you only get one kick at this canyon, this planet you're on, you know. They introduced Harold Denton, the NRC official, personally sent by Jimmy Carter to supervise the operation. They're all drawn straws, probably. Thornburgh says that, it's too bad, John Harold, that the indoor restrictions will be lifted at midnight for residents within a 10-mile radius. Thornburgh says the indoor restrictions will be lifted. You can go outdoors and get sick and die later. We don't care after that. Stop panicking. You're making the industry look bad. It's crazy. It's such a crazy statement, eh? Yeah, get behind your cardboard boxes. Thornburgh says the indoor restrictions will be lifted. Thornburgh. What they done was just it's unconscionable, eh? They're the authorities now. So if you have an accident, you have no rights anymore. Right? They take over your life. No, you can't go here. You can't do it there. You got to go over and stay in that gymnasium. No, you can't go to another state. We're in charge now. We're the boss now. You shut your mouth and sip you on your cardboard boxes. Official at the Oddfellows home of the Pennsylvania made a similar decision. These people are nuts. They're like power monsters. When you have the accident, you lose all your rights. When you have a nuclear radioactive fallout, you lose all your rights. They turn into dictators and judges. Responsibility for the emergency operation of the plant shifted to the NRC. Yeah, that didn't happen at Fukushima. Still TEPCO, because you don't want to blame the nuclear industry. Let's blame TEPCO. It's TEPCO. The responsibility for the emergency operations of the plant shifts to the non-regulatory commission. Just great. Responsibility for emergency shifted to the worst people possible. The Thornburgh advisory remains in effect. Mass evacuation is again discounted, and the reason was he didn't want the industry to look bad. Jimmy with his booties out. This was a few days ago, this picture. In December, the plant was sold. Or no, I'm wrong. I'm sorry. We're still back in that same story. Virgil sold outside the plant on the 40th anniversary. And this is 2021, this story. How Dick Thornburgh masterfully handled the 3 Mile Island disaster. All right. Thornburgh died the year before. So it appears that the history of the notorious 3 Mile accident event that produced so much angst amongst so many years across central Pennsylvania will end with a whimper, not a bang. So many scumbags, eh? So that's Harold Denton to your left of Nuclear Regulatory, Dick Thornburgh with the black glasses on. Two of the worst humans we've ever come across. At the time, averted the tragedy that millions feared and expected, a nuclear Armageddon. Dick Thornburgh. Well, no, because just because you pretended it didn't happen, that didn't mean it never happened. I mean, it didn't get poisoned. I mean, it doesn't mean it didn't get catastrophic health consequences over the years. I've been governor for a scant 71 days when he received an alarming phone call. Metropolitan Edison nuclear power plant located at 3 Mile Island in the Susquehanna River, a mere 11 miles from the state capital, Harrisburg, had been the site of a nuclear fallout. Other than a cursory briefing, he knew nothing about nuclear. And barely into his 1979 tenure as governor, he faced a challenge more consequential than any of his predecessors, the meltdown of one of 3 Mile Island's 2 nuclear reactors. The state of emergency was last till from March 28 to May the 9th. March, April, and May. Part of the governor's crisis management strategy was to manage the 3 Mile Island messaging narrative to the public. A propaganda strategy Thornburgh himself described as contradictory assessments, telling the public either more or less than they knew of the accident and its consequences. These incomplete, misleading statements from the 3 Mile Island management were partially feeding the public panic, and Thornburgh, to his best, corrected it. They said, as the crisis continued, Thornburgh was unflappable, producing a performance almost universally lauded. He was even suggested he should become the president in the future. At one time, one journalist wrote, Pennsylvania Thornburgh, extraordinary governor. Calm, deliberate method he brought to 3 Mile Island. Another comment put his handling of the situation in a political context. Suddenly everyone is talking about how Thornburgh would make a marvelous candidate for the vice president on the Republican ticket the next year. Because he was covering up he might have pains of conscience. See? He handled a tense situation where few folks actually realized the effects of a meltdown or its cause, and Dick Thornburgh had no idea. So he was taking his cues from the machine itself that are just despicable creatures. The pro-nuclear community, they're despicable. From the outset, the governor faced a big decision whether to evacuate 200,000 people in the immediate vicinity of a nuclear meltdown. Well, that's the problem with the nuclear industry, isn't it? They know they're going to have multiple accidents over their legacy, and they're ready to cover it up. That's their job. They got all kinds of public relation firms on queue ready to go. Now they got them all. Now they got every one of them, right? Evacuation carry an inherent risk to life and limb of potential evacuees, as well as increasing the already intense public anxiety about the accident that he had to weigh against the possibility of the damage a core meltdown would produce. But he had no narrative. He didn't understand anything about this whatsoever. He was just given like a 1-2. It splits atoms and they fall out of the sky. Okay, I'm good. Let me go. Like, you don't go into a nuclear meltdown with your little tiny suits on, okay? Doesn't work. These are nuclear meltdowns. The energy will pulse right through a 6-foot wooden wall, for instance. Then we're talking about and give you a lethal dose. So, like, you have to wear a massive lead suit. And the glass would have to be, like, foot thick or something to go into proximity of these melted reactor cores. Ultimately, they correctly refused to issue a general evacuation order, despite intense political pressure on him to do so. There was intense political pressure. Thornburgh sagely commented that there was no Republican or Democratic way to deal with a nuclear crisis. No, you just regurgitate whatever the nuclear industry tells you to do, whatever the International Atomic Energy Agency was telling him to do. That's what he was doing. That's who was calling the shots. Wasn't the non-regulatory. They were the buffer zone from the kingpins, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the scum of the humanity. On the third day of the crisis, he did recommend that pregnant women and preschool kids living within 5 miles leave the area. So on the third day, because he didn't want that statistic, right, showing up so dramatic. They knew they couldn't avoid it, but they didn't want it to be explosive. And I showed you some of the statistics at the beginning tonight. Right, it was catastrophic for newborns. And the reason for Thornburgh's stellar performance were many, perhaps 4, were the most crucial. He refused to issue a general evacuation order, which could have created a panic. We got headline after headline after headline of Fukushima where they refused to evacuate because they didn't want to cause panic, or they didn't want panic to set in, or they were worried about losing control of the population because they would panic, and that's why they didn't evacuate people. And so every nuclear plant in the United States is surrounded by sirens up to 10 miles away. They're not going to use them because they don't want to create panic. You don't have any, like, they have to tell the public to turn the sirens on. They're not going to do it. In fact, if it happens, they'll come out and say it was an accident. And there's a chain of command. There's like 6 or 7 people before you can finally use that siren. But then the nuclear regulatory will come in and say, "What? Like, that would tell them it was an accident. Just go out and rescind it." And we've seen that over and over and over. And here in Canada, they sent out several, like 4 million text messages, and they used the sirens, saying there's been a release at the Pickering nuclear power plant, or Bruce Power, on the Great Lakes, and then they rescinded it a few hours later because the people were just in blind panic. They said, "Oh, we can't have that. That looks bad on nuclear industry." And the nuclear industry owns Canada. He refused to issue an evacuation order which could have created panic. That's absurd, isn't it? His public comments reassured folks that there was no cause for alarm, but he has no experience. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's taking the words of scumbags from the nuclear industry. Well, he's getting most of his narrative is coming from the nuclear regulatory degenerate that Dave Carter pointed, but he's not opening his fucking pie hole without talking to the International Atomic Energy Agency. Right? He's not going to put out any statement without getting them. They would fax him what he was allowed to say, and it would change according to what they needed to adjust. On the third day of the crisis, the serial killer recommended that the pregnant women and preschool kids living within 5 miles leave the area because you had dogs going blind, cats going blind. His public comment reassured folks there was no cause for alarm. But he would remain vigilant and alert, reassuring people and being a visible presence. And he refused to issue an alert because he didn't want to cause a panic. So what does that really tell us, though? It tells us that these people are actually monsters, and why should you trust them? Why would you give them 2 seconds of your trust? It's the worst thing you can do. I have no doubt that Jimmy Carter threw his clothes away the minute he got back on Air Force One. And if they were thrown off the plane before he took off, he would have probably shaved his head. In 1979, a pressure valve in a reactor at 3 Mile Island nuclear plant failed to close, causing a near-critical meltdown. So they refused to acknowledge. See, over and over and over, we see those connotations where they refuse to acknowledge. America's worst commercial nuke, again, commercial, right? And it just doesn't, for the average person, they don't question it. They say, well, what else would have happened, right? If that's a commercial, is there a worst? And they're not able to articulate what the reply is. Is there a worse nuclear meltdown at one of the national laboratories? See? Right, that doesn't. The average person is not going to be naturally suspect of that statement. They'll just see the worst commercial nuclear accident. But that was plausible deniability for the journalist who didn't write the story. Right, it was written by the nuclear industry, and the journalist puts their name on it. It was a partial meltdown again, right? America's worst commercial nuclear accident and a partial meltdown. They're very dishonest and they're very smart at how they frame everything as for plausible deniability, but they're nuclear power plant leaks radiation. Yeah, every time you hear that word, you immediately should come over to my site to see if I got any updates for you in the future. Because every time you hear the word leak, that's a major event. Look at this. This is the most craziest picture conceivable. Hey, Mark, I got to run down to 3 Mile Island. There's a nuclear meltdown. I got to go. I've never seen a nuclear meltdown before. Honey, get the kids. Let's get the kids and we'll go down and see the meltdown. Will there be flames? I don't know, honey. I've never seen a meltdown before. Hard cases. It's just people running to a meltdown. Man. I got no idea what's going on here. Don't ask me. I don't know. That's weird. Oh, I see. That's number 3. That's number 3, so that should be there. Should be there. Okay, I got it. I'll figure it out at some point. There we are. I just don't get that. Like, anybody got these kids there, right? Yeah, you got the kid there. So when you grow up, you can tell them, have we been to that nuclear meltdown? Oh, Daddy, you're the greatest. You were at 3 Mile. He's probably telling people today, I was at 3 Mile Island. Daddy took me down there. We went down to see the meltdown. It was crazy. You should have seen it. Imagine. I got all journalists there with all their cameras. Mom and Pa got the kids down too. Look at that. Oh, yeah, the kids down to 3 Mile Island. So those kids will grow up and they'll tell the story. They were at 3 Mile Island now. So whenever somebody tells you they were at 3 Mile Island when it melted down, don't forget. They probably were. You got security cameras, look. Our cases. It happened today. Radioactive steam leaked into the atmosphere. On the same day, Prime Minister James Callaghan loses a parliament vote. He gets a little blurb in the history. Today in history. This is 2022, this story, I think. America's worst commercial nuclear accident with a partial meltdown inside of Unit 2. Propaganda is really important too, right? And you got to reinforce it. It's like, yeah, the 3 Mile Island, partial meltdown, wasn't it, Dana? Yeah. Community group created to advise 3 Mile cleanup. Community surrounding the shuttered 3 Mile Island nuclear disease factory. Well, they should close all the farms anyway. There's farms all over the place. They're just pictures from 3 Mile Island. Oh, you take Georgia. I take Grenada. Go. What am I looking at? That's the control room, is it? Oh yeah, here's one of the robots. Should have rolled that one in for Fukushima. 15 people represent the plant as neighbors, including townships, school districts, first responders, nuclear planners, state historians. Just not going down there. We already covered that one. It wasn't a surge in coal pollution that caused it. It was the multiple generations of babies with congenital malformation showing up at a smaller weight. You see lots of studies in the species where they have the same attributes. Agency could keep 3 Mile Island nuclear debris in Idaho. Again, the partial meltdown. The worst nuclear accident in U.S. history, which is simply not true. Right, Santa Susana was 463 Mile Islands melting down. Could remain in Idaho for another 20 years. The core of the 3 Mile Island partial meltdown event that changed the way Americans view nuclear. There was 100 reactors were cancelled after. The U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission has determined there would be no significant impact from extending the license to store the core at the Idaho National Laboratory, 890 square miles. They say nuclear doesn't take up very much room compared to solar, right? But they forget to include Idaho National Laboratory, 890 square miles. 3 Mile Island, 585 square miles. So imagine how radioactive Idaho National Laboratories is. It's like, holy shit. And it's on one of the biggest aquifers in that part of the world. The department sits atop the eastern Snake Plain Aquifer, a Lake Erie-sized underground body of water. It's the size of Lake Erie, the Great Lakes, right? The third biggest aquifer on the planet. Well, this aquifer is about 1/3 of the fresh water, or that'd be about 1/10 of the fresh water on the planet, was under the Idaho National Laboratory site. It's just, but you see the particular attribute for all the national laboratories, so you assume it's going to be the same thing for every country. That's their old shit plan when they have a meltdown. They know they're going to have a meltdown. And the eastern Snake Plain Aquifer is incredibly contaminated in just the first 15 years or something. Supplies cities and farms in the region with water. So it's the eastern Snake Plain Aquifer is the biggest in that part of the country. The new license will be good for 2039, 4 years past the deadline. Initially set with Idaho to remove the radioactive waste. So it's currently sitting at Idaho National Laboratory. You know they're going to take that and do experiments with it, right? Because they really are Jekyll and Hyde and Frankenstein down there. It's not clear what the 3 Mile Island waste could be moved, as the U.S. doesn't have a designated repository, because you can't control the emissions. The problem is the fuel from the nuclear meltdowns and fuel rods themselves from reactor cores that are finished the fuel cycle are still splitting atoms for millions of years. And so that process is catastrophic. Amount of radiation released every day from 1,000 fuel pools worldwide, but all of these extra particular events, right? They're all splitting atoms all the time. And the amount we're talking about is, it would be like a snowstorm covering the planet in 30 days. And the snow never melts and it never stops snowing, if this was snow. If this produced snow instead of anthropogenic man-made atoms, then that's how you should conceive this. Just let me give you a better idea. So 23 days. This was 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air from the French government. And that's 23 days of radioactive fallout from Fukushima. 3 Mile Island would have had the same thing. And so that whole environment would have been incredibly, disgustingly contaminated. Uh, 183 pounds, 83,000 kilograms of damaged nuclear fuel assemblies, and 8,000 pounds rather, of material removed from the reactor vessel. 183,000 pounds of fuel. How did they move that? I wonder, because we covered this a lot over the years. Still haven't figured out. I know they put it on a train, but I still haven't figured out how they could contain 1,000 pounds of this stuff. Even if you got a 50,000 pound cast, I can't see how that can shield anybody. So the people on both sides of the train tracks must have been getting a horrific fucking doses. Just catastrophic. Before the 1979 nuclear meltdown at 3 Mile Island, the owners touted that the cost of making electricity from nuclear power was too cheap to meter. Now it's so expensive, 3 Mile owner and other companies are shutting down nuclear plants across the United States. It was once too cheap to meter, now it's too toxic to clean up. The billboard also referred to the 3 Mile Island Alert website. And then, isn't that site still going? That guy's been working anti-nuclear for 46 years or something. 3 Mile Island has a legacy of broken promises. And the accident at 3 Mile is not over, and the saga continues. This story here is crazy. This was, again, Arnie Gunnarsson. I played a little clip of it before where he talked about sending people in for 3 minutes to the nuclear meltdown. They get their lifetime dose. That was murder. Testing of evaporators began at 3 Mile Island. He didn't say, I got my 3-minute dose, because there's no way he's going near it. Testing of evaporators began at 3 Mile Island. So 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant workers prepare Wednesday to begin testing equipment used to boil off 2.3 million gallons of water contaminated in the nation's worst commercial, right? Again, you see that word, nuclear accident. That way they don't have to acknowledge Santa Susana happened, which was equal to 460 3 Mile Islands melting down at the one time in radioactive emissions. According to, gradually released into the air in the form of steam during an 18 to 24 month period. So they took this absurdly radioactive water. They've done this many places too, by the way, over the years. This is stuff that was poured on the fuel, the so-called cool it down. Where did the rest of it go? Because you're talking about 10 years trying to cool down the fuel. Where did all that water go? It was released into the environment. And so you're boiling off multiple sieverts per liter, and which means there's enough that turns into radioactive fallout. That never goes away. All the radioactive fallout since, best way to look at this industry is all the radioactive fallout combined since 80 years ago is still out there pulsing energy every second. Right? It's an invisible snowstorm that covers the planet, pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second. And you got to breathe it in, you got to consume it, you got to drink it, because it's everywhere now, and it's never gone away. It doesn't go away. And you got 1,000 fuel pools on this planet splitting atoms, each of them creating a plume similar to that each day. And that model is 23 days of Fukushima. Out of 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. And cesium-137 is pulsing energy 600 feet every second. It's a gamma. And that'll also end up in your thyroid and your adrenaline and pituitary glands. Gradually released into the air in the form of steam. It's radioactive steam. Radioactive fallout. And contaminates everything for millions of years. And there's fuel particulates. So they're released and they're still splitting atoms forever. It contains about 18 drops worth of tritium bonded water. Like, you never had no way of filtering this stuff, because the filter is so radioactive you can never go near it to change it. You can't go near the pipes because you'll get a lethal dose just walking over them. And so when you hear the tritium, you should, these are people that you should see if they're still alive and figure out how to prosecute them. These are literally and figuratively monsters in every sense of the word. And many times you're any monster you'll ever see in Hollywood. There are a billion times those monsters. Radioactive fallout is a curse. It's a curse on 8 million species. And it's a curse on you and your friends and your families and your loved ones that will haunt you for the rest of your lives. And there's nothing you can do about it, so hold them accountable. You got nothing to lose. You got everything to gain, actually. The release is effect on the average person because holding them accountable is good for your soul. The release's effects on the average person living within 50 miles of 3 Mile Island will be less than the amount of radiation, get a load of this, received from a year of watching color television, Bedell said. A year of watching color television. That's not a sadistic demon. Holy jeez. Who's Bedell? Let me go backwards here. Man, that is a monstrous thing to say. That's a frightening lie on top of that. Let me find Bedell. The monster. Oh, right here. Let's find that guy Bedell. He's got to be there. Doug Bedell, a spokesperson. I might not be able to find that spokesperson. Oh yeah, GPU Nuclear Corporation. He said it's equal to watching color television for an extra year. If I was young and healthier, like, I would say I want to kick the shit out of that guy. Or if I ever see that guy, I'll kick the shit out of him, because I would. If I was young, right? Oh, no, so he doesn't have to worry about me. Throw my cane at him or something. $4 million to rid the water of contamination. Like, what are you talking about? There's no evidence you can do that. Test on the evaporators can process 5 gallons of water a minute. We'll begin with clean water to check the mechanics, installations, and equipment. It will take about 10 days. These are demons, eh? The Non-Regulatory Commission and the State Department of Environmental Resources will oversee. That's another of the most scariest things you're ever going to hear. Like, I wouldn't let the International Atomic Energy Agency or anybody in the nuclear industry make a statement that's not backed up by independent anti-nuclear academics or people. The water was contaminated during and after March 28, 1979. Near meltdown, the damage to number 2 reactor and the worst commercial power nuclear reactor accident ever in the United States. That simply wasn't true. 1959 to Santa Susana, which wasn't commercial. It was infinitely worse because it was a sodium reactor. So it was even worse. It was 460. It was equal to 460 3 Mile Island meltdown. But again, see, so that never gets mentioned, ever. And I showed you the evidence of it earlier because I'm a sucker for punishment. Most of the radioactive material in the water, including tons of boron, like most of the radioactive material, including boron. So boron and tritium, right? And the boron will be collected and shipped off site as low-level waste, Bedell says. Will be separated through filtration, demineralization systems. This is like we're talking about uranium, plutonium, americium, ruthenium, strontium. If you put all them together, you're going to have a chain reaction, a criticality, or you're going to have a recriticality from the elements, from the neutron bombardments. You can't separate them. So what are you talking about? You can't filter this kind of stuff. You can filter anything, don't get me wrong. Theoretically, you can filter this. But how are you going to change the filter after 10 minutes? Because by right, you need to change the filter every minute. Because then maybe, just maybe, you can get close enough to change the filters. If you change the filter every second, rather. Because the bioaccumulation is a nightmare of this stuff in a filter. You're talking about a dirty bomb. You're talking about 1,000 sieverts after 20 minutes. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose to a human. Even if you got 6 feet of lead around that filter, how are you going to pick it up and change it? Like it's up, the whole story that they can filter anything is absurd. They can reclaim uranium, plutonium by boiling the fuel rods in 3,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures of boric acid at 3,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures in a box, what they call a box, the hot box, the glove box, right? And then they can aggregate the plutonium and uranium-235s, the fission products. That whole setup is insanely sophisticated. And it's the emissions there's from, say, Sellafield and La Hague in France, Sellafield, Donneray in the United Kingdom. These couple of facilities are credited with poisoning the Arctic from the radioactive fallout, and Europe with the radioactive fallout. Like, these are disease factories, simple and plain. Drop dead, met Ed. I agree. Okay, well, they screwed with me tonight. And we ended up with a late show. So what time is it? I haven't got my phone here. Oops. Hope nobody was texting me or trying to call me. All right. So you have to excuse me if it seems like I'm still like off my game. It's because I am. I am off my game. It took me 40 minutes to get the show up and running. Let me see what time it is over here. I can check the time over here. Oh, it's not bad. 35 minutes past. That was only about 30 minutes, was it, or something in that case? Oh, I see. I'll bring a picture in here now in a second. A filler. 3 Mile Island. It's not the one. See all the farms right there in the Susquehanna River? That's drinking water, and there's all kinds of farms are siphoning out of that. So all of them are contaminated. And we had to start a new live show tonight. Let me see what I got done here. My apologies. My apologies. I know James had posted a new song, a rap song. The risk is acceptable Tokyo Bureau transmission. Now, I don't know if I got audio. I downloaded one of James's songs because I was having problems with the audio. But he posted a new song also. Let's see if we can get audio. Oh, we got audio. Holy shit. Yee doggy. So the audio was the tip off. They had hacked me, I guess. Because I had to go in and do another session. Because when we went live on my last... Well, that makes me happy we got that working. Dirty buggers, hey, to do that to me tonight. They were hoping I wasn't going to record it. I guess they were planning on chopping a bunch of stuff out. Well, I'm recording it. So we're going to come in and close down the poll after. We're going to play this song that James got. He just published it. I'll put it in my... Look, I got 0 thumbs up. See that? I just gave him thumbs up. Hey, I'll check. I'll refresh that page in a second. We're going to play his latest song. I added to the anti-nuclear music playlist. I got a lot of James's anti-nuclear song. And I'm going to adjust the audio on my side. James is really good with his audio, but it's easier for me because I want to make sure I got high quality before I play it. And there's a bit of chaos tonight. I know that. We'll end it on another song. The first song also came from James's website, Dr. Sternglass, if you want to look it up. And we'll see everybody on the next show. Again, I apologize because it's hard for me where it's later than... Anyway, here we go. I'll adjust the volume for you.
We understood the uncertainty. We understood the fear. And so, we wrapped the numbers in a sheath of emotion. Because scientific knowledge cannot reach the heart, not without modulation. The public worried their knowledge was lacking, their understanding unsystematic. So we gave them answers, carefully, with dignity, with phrasing calibrated to preserve confidence. We asked, will you return to your hometown? The residents hesitated. The elderly waited. Some carried dosimeters, some didn't. But the message was already archived. The radiation level should be lowered. And it was. The dialogue was important. Experts spoke. Residents nodded. Tritium water was discussed. Calm down, Charlie delivered the message from the Chicago division with operational clarity. He said, it is okay. He said, it's time to return. There was no absolute right answer, only acceptable risk. And if someday the archive replays this transmission, remember, we took responsibility. We aligned with standards. We maintained dignity. And the risk was acceptable.
Dr. Sternglass knew the risk. A silent war, invisible twist. From the fallout clouds to the gamma rays, he saw the truth in a poisoned haze. They laughed him off, they turned away, but the radiation never fades away. Dr. Sternglass, can you hear us now? We ignored the warnings, don't know how. We breathe it in, it's in the breeze. The slow decay brings us to our knees. In the quiet towns where secrets seep, the silent burn beneath our feet. Sternglass warned as the world moved on, but in the ground the danger's drawn. The truth he spoke, buried deep, as fallout spreads while the children sleeps away. Dr. Sternglass, can you hear us now? We ignored the warnings, don't know how. We breathe it in, it's in the breeze. The slow decay brings us to our knees. From Chernobyl's dust to Fukushima's tide, he showed the path where sickness hides. The rivers glow, the soil turned black, but the suits keep pushing, won't look back. The numbers grow, the cancer spreads, the media shrugs, the science dead. You can't feel it, can't see the burn, but Sternglass knew it's our turn. Radiation crawling through the land, while they cash in with bloodstained hands. It's in the rain, it's in the sea, it's creeping slow, too blind to see. They sealed the leaks, but it's too late. The winds have carried our poisoned fate. Babies born to a world unknown,